If you thought that loot boxes were predatory about exploiting the way you consume content, well, it's got nothing on today's topic. I'm of course talking about net neutrality, a term that you have no doubt heard a lot about over the past few days and weeks. In case you don't know what it is, net neutrality is the principle that internet service providers, or ISPs, like Comcast, Verizon, and AT&T should not control what we see or do online, and that they must treat all data on the internet the same for everyone. It stipulates that they can't discriminate or charge differently based on user, content, website, platform, application, you name it. It stipulates that the internet should be accessible, fair, and open for all. Seems like a pretty reasonable proposal, wouldn't you say? Now, what's been happening lately is that the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC, has proposed to repeal net neutrality laws. The man leading the charge, Trump-appointed FCC Chair Ajit Pai, who I should have you know was a former Verizon lawyer. If all this news went over your head somehow, that may be in part because the FCC strategically announced this proposal during Thanksgiving week while America was preoccupied with festivities. That should already tell you something. So, what will happen if net neutrality is repealed? Essentially, it will give internet service providers complete control of how you use and consume content on the internet. They'll be able to charge, throttle, or even outright block sites that don't suit their business interests. For example, Comcast could speed up their Hulu streaming service and put it in the fast lane while slowing down competitors like Netflix. Or if there's a startup service that's up and coming and Comcast sees them as a threat, they could decide to put them in the slow lane, charge them a fee to get into the fast lane that they may not be able to afford, and ruin the startup's potential to reach millions of people and succeed. From the consumer's end, ISPs could sell you certain websites in cable TV style packages, making them less accessible. So YouTube and Netflix might fall under an entertainment package that you might have to pay a few extra dollars for a month, or Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram might fall under the social media package, and you might have to pay another few bucks for that. What we currently have is a system in which we pay ISPs a monthly fee and we get access to the entire internet. But without net neutrality, they could divvy up the internet however they want, and they could speed up, slow down, favor, block, or charge for different sites. To put it simply, the repeal of net neutrality will make these companies a ton of money, and that is the main intention behind this move. But perhaps the scariest part about all this is that it paves the way for ISPs to control the flow of information, deciding for us what news or content we should or shouldn't consume. So if there's a website that's speaking out against Comcast in a way that's negatively impacting their interests and image, they could decide to throttle or outright block the site without discourse. And that, to me, beyond the billions of dollars that they'll rake in from the repeal of net neutrality, is a terrifying prospect, because when you control information, you control everything. Information is power, and by giving the few major ISPs in the US total control of how information and content flows in the one place where most people in our modern day and age get their information from, we are giving profits-focused, multi-billion-dollar companies far more power than they should ever have. Furthermore, with the repeal of net neutrality, ISPs would also have the power to violate users' privacy and gain access to your internet browsing history on a whim, while they themselves would be able to forego having to be transparent about their own practices. Current net neutrality laws stipulate that if ISPs are slowing down, speeding up, or in any way discriminating data flow, they have to disclose it and explain why. Without net neutrality, they are under no obligation to do so. They can enact whatever underhanded tactics that they want without having to tell us. Kind of like how an unregulated EA and other major gaming publishers have been able to implement underhanded predatory practices in their games right under our noses without having to tell us. If this stuff is starting to scare you, well, it should. We aren't just talking about loot boxes and the fate of AAA games anymore. we are talking about the fate of the entire internet as we know it. It's because of net neutrality that small startups like Facebook, YouTube, and other groundbreaking websites and online services were able to rise from humble beginnings to what they've become today. It's because of net neutrality that bloggers, forums, communities, and YouTubers like myself can freely make videos like these to exercise our freedom of speech and reach the internet as a whole without ISPs looming over us. It's because of net neutrality that you have the freedom to access internet content without having to jump through additional hoops or without having ISPs simply telling you no. It is because of net neutrality that the internet has paved the way to all kinds of unprecedented innovation, communication, and progress. The principle of net neutrality is the cornerstone of what makes the internet so fucking great. We, as a collective, built this beautiful beast, not just a handful of rich corporations. But if the FCC goes through with the repeal of net neutrality on December 14th, 2017, all this incredible potential that the internet gives to users will go away. Now, ISPs like Comcast are promising that they won't exploit their newfound powers, but you'd be a fool to think for a second that they don't have ulterior motives in gaining so much power and influence. You'd be a fool to just take their word for it. Hell, the very same day that the FCC announced net neutrality's repeal, Comcast deleted their no pay prioritization pledge. Does that sound like the kind of company who will do the right thing for you? If you're a gamer, did companies like EA ever take the moral high ground when they were given all the power to regulate the shape of their game's online infrastructure the way they see fit? Of course not. Instead, at every given opportunity, they've implemented the means to exploit players for profit through predatory loot boxes that prey on gambling addictions. The equivalent of that will happen with the likes of Comcast when they control the internet. Time and again, history has proven that when power goes unchecked, the wielder will exploit it for their own selfish gains. Regardless of your political affiliations or beliefs, I don't think it's crazy to say that the idea of a free and open internet is fairly universal. Unless you are among the very few who will profit and benefit from the repeal of net neutrality, it's safe to say that you want the internet to stay the way it is, open, fair, and free. Which is why it is absolutely pivotal that we all fight the FCC's plan to repeal net neutrality with the same fervor that we used to fight EA's loot boxes, because this battle is far bigger than that. The soul of America's internet is at stake. How can you fight back? Well, much like with the Battlefront 2 fiasco, spread the message, make your voices heard, and contact government officials, Congress in particular in this case. Currently, the best website that I've come across that fully lays out the entire issue and ways you can fight back is battleforthenet.com. There you will find means to call Congress and tell them that this is not the kind of future that you want to support. You'll find a map to search for Verizon retail store locations across the US for a mass protest that will be taking place on December 7th. You'll find tons of video sources that explain net neutrality and the ramifications of its repeal far better than I do, and it's basically a one-stop shop for all things net neutrality. Another great site is this Reddit post that does a really good job of compiling all of the ways you can fight for net neutrality. I've linked both sites in the description and comments below. By the way, you want to know why both of these websites are readily accessible and allowed to exist despite being unfavorable against the entities providing us the internet? You guessed it, net neutrality. Without it, we could be looking at a future in which protesting sites like these might be throttled or blocked by ISPs to limit their reach and suppress our voices. The reason we can use the internet to rally like this so quickly, efficiently, openly, and freely is because of net neutrality. The ability to do stuff like this right here on our own terms is exactly what we're fighting for. So if you care about the internet, if you care about the content that you consume every day, like this video right here, go visit battleforthenet.com, look through all the material which has been very neatly laid out, and fight for the soul of one of mankind's greatest and most important inventions. The vote to repeal net neutrality happens in just 2 weeks on December 14th, 2017. I won't lie to you, with 3 out of the 5 FCC commissioners being Republicans in favor of the repeal, just as the Trump administration planned, we are fighting an uphill battle. But even if the vote passes, that doesn't mean that the battle's over and your internet will immediately go to shit. This isn't some doomsday clock or anything. As a recent article by website Gizmodo put it, after the repeal, in reality, the net neutrality fight is merely migrating to a different theater, namely the US Courts of Appeals. And excluding the possibility of a Supreme Court challenge, the outcome may very well drag on for another year and a half or more. So while I'm certainly not saying relax, I do want to make it clear that all hope isn't lost even if the vote does pass 2 weeks from now, which it likely will. There are still a lot of hoops that the FCC will have to jump through to push this thing through all the way. But for now, we have to do what we can to make our voices heard in unison, regardless of our beliefs or political affiliation. Because the internet doesn't belong to any one faction, group, or party. It belongs to the collective of mankind. That's one thing that I think most of us can agree on. So let's make sure that it stays that way.